Hi, my name is Tracy Thorup. I'm the CEO of My Practice, My Business, and welcome to the My Practice, My Business Roundtable series. Today, we're going to talk about the year in review and what we expect to come in 2025, and we start right now. Thank you for joining us today, and today we're joined by a couple of guests. We'll start over here.
I'm Dave Mecham,
And tell me about yourself, Dave.
longtime partner in My Practice, My Business. I work on my dental docs, my dental stats. We have a lot of dental websites out there, lots going on.
And we all know who this guy is over on my left here.
And of course, I'm Rob Thorup, president of My Practice, My Business, practicing dentist since 1989. And I'm excited to be here for this recap, and let's get going.
Let's go. We've got a lot to cover, actually. So the first thing we wanted to do, the goal is ultimately to talk about all the things that we reflect on as we start getting phone calls from other states and people with concerns over not just insurance companies, but what legally and contractually they can and can't do, and the involvement in third-party people, like whether they're companies or associations. And so I thought this would be a really good time to just have that discussion, throw it all out there, and make some plans from there. So let's talk a little bit about laws in general and legislation. I think that the number one thing that offices need to understand, regardless of what state they're currently in, is most states have a non-covered law that they can apply when it comes to a lot of services that they've been normally writing off. And so having that discussion about what a non-covered law is and what they should be asking specifically these insurance companies when these EOBs become a little bit deceptive, I think is really important to know. So having said that, have you had any issues with these insurance companies or other people calling about insurance companies with non-covered services?
So I'm sitting here listening to your to your introduction, sweetheart, and I'm thinking to myself, what kind of response am I going to give? And it's going to be as per usual, reasonable, customary. It's going to be candid. And so I'm thinking about several of the executives we've talked to in states and experiences that we've had in other states. And most dentists and their front office team members have no idea what non-covered service laws they have, or more importantly, how to apply them. And so I'm going back to, and I know we'll get into this a little later, but as I'm looking at the law and review, it's like, what defines a covered service? And I guess you're the best one to answer what actually defines a non-covered service in a state. Kick that out, and we'll continue that conversation. Go for it. What is what constitutes a non-covered service?
So the states actually define in their non-covered service law what a covered service is. And so it will vary by state. For example, in the state of Utah, a covered service is anything that would be reimbursable if not for, and they'll give a list of things. So the most common things we're going to see is waiting periods or maximums or alternate benefits, things similar to that. But what's really interesting with Utah is they've added on age limitations as well, which means fluoride. So a lot of offices will treat fluoride like a non-covered code, and they'll bill out their full fee thinking, well, it's not covered over the age of 14.
Right.
But in the state of Utah, it is covered if they were up to that age 14, and we legally have to honor that lower fee. But in other states, they don't have age limitations as a definition under covered services, and that allows them to bill out their full fee once that patient hits the age 14 and older. And so making sure you understand what the state has defined that covered service to be is really important, because that'll help you determine when you should be billing out your full fee versus not.
So I'm thinking to myself, non-covered services, every time an EOB comes in and it states that, this is inclusive or non-billable to the patient, I know that I've listened to you, I've listened to our team members, and I've watched you teach this over and over again in the insurance module and in the advanced training. The key thing to ask is this a covered service? Or is this a covered service under the plan? When they say, you've got to write that off. And so I'm going to go back to, here we are training offices, and I see that aha moment. I see them where they go, oh my gosh, you mean all I have to do is say, is this a service covered under the plan? And if the insurance company says, no, it's not. But they sit there and they'll still say, it's inclusive, you have to write it off, you have to write it off, until you corner them.
Yes.
Right? And they say, then you say, is this a covered service under the plan? And then they say no. Then we fire back, well, then it's the patient's responsibility, correct?
Yes. Well, and I was just thinking about that with you, Dave. As a patient, it's frustrating because you want services to be done, but then you're looking at your EOB or your explanation of benefits in the mail, and it'll say something like, we consider this to be inclusive and not billable, and it'll allude to you as a patient that you're not responsible for the service. And so we have this really weird balance that we have to have in dental of how do we make sure that Dave, the patient, understands that we know what the laws are, we're treatment planning accordingly, and you as a patient need to be aware that these EOBs a lot of times are incorrect. And so it's something that we really have to balance when it comes to non-covered services. And so what I tend to do is, number one, if I know that a service is not covered under the plan, I'm going to identify that, and then I'm going to mark it as not covered by insurance using my practice management software. I'm going to treatment plan Dave the patient, saying this is a non-covered code, it is your responsibility, and make it very clear that it's not covered. And most of the times patients will purchase whatever it is that they're getting, and then they'll just pay up front, just like any other service.
Right.
And we don't really have to worry so much about those EOBs, but you get those situations where the patient looks at this EOB and it says something like, we consider it to be inclusive and not billable. And the patient has questions. And so that's where I hope the patient would call me and say, what's going on? It looks like it's not covered or it's inclusive. So this is where we do need to get involved with the insurance companies and know our state law, because instead of the insurance companies just stating simply, this is a non-covered code, it makes them look bad. And so they're going to try and do what's called bundling, which I know we're going to talk about. And they'll say something like, well, we consider it to be inclusive and not billable, and in an effort to allude that we should be writing off that non-covered service. So a majority of these things, we can actually just call them up quickly, get eligibility and benefits, and say, I need to check and see whether or not these certain codes are covered or not under the patient's plan. And a majority of the time, they say it's not covered. And so per state law, if it's not covered, then they have no right to state whether or not it's included, not billable, lower fee. They have no say in that code anymore.
So what you're saying, Tracy, is office managers can actually identify CDT codes, just a whole list of them, 5, 10, 15, 20 codes, and call an insurance company and just say, are these codes covered under the plan? They don't have to call on every patient.
Nope.
They could just make a one-time phone call, and then they know. And even if the EOB states, so Dave gets work done, and the EOB states that it should be inclusive, it lies to you, which we know that the EOBs lie. And so then Dave calls and says, hey, I'm supposed to get this for free. And you say, actually, Dave, no, because it's a non-covered service and your EOB is not being truthful. And that's the kind of conversation that all the front office team members should be having if they want to be paid fairly for the services they provide. So they get that phone call to the insurance company. These are non-covered services, right? Right. And they can actually have a list, just a quick reference list in a folder looking really fast. That's a non-covered service. Like, for example, pulp vitality test or diagnostic casts or anything that could be in there that they could call. And I'm going to go back to, and I know we're going to talk about this when we talk about the national, the ADA support and state association support. But this goes right back to who's teaching these wonderful front office team members this information? Nobody. What you just stated, we know, based upon our conversation with executives from other states, that over 90% of the dental team members have no idea that they even have a non-covered service law
Mm-hmm.
that applies to dentistry, let alone how to apply that law, which goes into the network leasing, downcoding, and bundling protections law, which we wrote, which our own executive in the state of Utah, going and talking to dentists that are out there, they have no idea how to apply the law. They don't even know, they've heard of the law, they don't know how to apply the law. And it goes back to something, and I'm probably jumping ahead, that all three of us were talking about earlier. Where would the state of Utah be? Where would the dentists in Utah be if it hadn't been for us pushing House Bill 359 and getting it pushed through, and having other stuff that you and I are working on in legislation, and getting other things pushed through? I mean, I'm not sitting here pointing fingers. Our execs got his hands full of other stuff going on. I mean, we could list those things out, but I don't want to, get into a battle with, the hygienists and then the cross-pollination of licensure that he's currently battling right now, which is taking up all of his time. But I'm asking myself, here we have these wonderful laws that are passed. By the way, Tennessee passed our law word for word, and there's other states that I know that you're working with to get the law passed, the House Bill 359 law. But again, it's like, these laws get passed, but the bottleneck is the fact that nobody's out there training them.
That's right. Well, going
How
back
how to apply the law.
going back just slightly,
Yeah.
going back to the non-covered law, what I push all offices to do throughout the state, different states, is to, number one, just know that there is a non-covered law, and that non-covered law is going to trump a lot when it comes to these contracts.
Exactly.
And so these insurance companies are going to be bundling.
Right.
We already know they're going to. But instead of just blindly writing it off, the first thing that they can do is ask whether or not that particular code is covered or not under the plan, because it does vary slightly by plan. And so you need to double check on that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about ERISA plans and self-funded plans too.
That's what I was just going to get into, going to ask you about right now, because every time we talk about the law review, I mean, we even had the major representative of Delta Dental when we were battling House Bill 359. First thing he starts out with, well, here's the problem with your proposed law on downcoding and bundling, Rob and Tracy and everybody there. We're talking, what do you say, 40% of all plans nationwide, or 50% are ERISA plans. And again, a lot of offices don't understand what the term ERISA means, and let alone federal plans or self-funded plans, of which federal plans currently to date will supersede state law.
Yes.
But having said that, 40 to 50% of the plans in the majority of states are not federal plans.
That's correct.
So if we're talking about between 10 and 25% of the plans in all the states being federal plans, then why aren't the associations really jumping on these state laws and teaching their members how to apply them?
So question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's because they don't have a picture of how this affects their patient experience in their office from the beginning to the end? So for example, I come, you're my dentist, right?
I can neither confirm nor deny, due to HIPAA rules and regulations, whether you are my patient or not. No, I'm just kidding.
But, I come here because it's a top tier experience.
Thanks.
Right?
We try hard.
And I want what I want. And so I don't mind paying for extra things that make it better.
Right.
But
which we'll get into some more too.
But don't you think that practices everywhere really don't have that full picture? They don't know how to make their patient experience better by using the laws?
Good point.
Well, and I think that...
Well, and again, though, sorry to interrupt, sweetheart. Not that I've ever done that before.
Never.
But they don't have the full picture. Again, I asked the why. Why do they not have that full picture? And I remember when Senator Christensen here in Utah got the non-covered service law passed, it's like, look what we did. We got the non-covered service law passed in the state of Utah. Great, fantastic. It felt like a bait and switch, though, how they were trying to teach us how to apply the law, not how we just described it here with what we train our clients on. Get a list of all the codes, make a one-time call. Is this covered, non-covered?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can actually, and then here's the problem, then you can actually make sure that you adjust that fee schedule. Everybody wants to bill out their fee-for-service fees, which is an accounting nightmare
Mm-hmm.
and a potentially fraudulent situation that can happen in every practice when that happens. But even when they bill it out, and it comes, like they bill out fee-for-service, even under a PPO plan, and it comes back and shows what they have to write off, it'll show writing off the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
because it's inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even fully understand what they're charging, but you're right, Dave, they don't have the vision, they don't have the full picture on how they can be profitable. But here's, again, going back to that vision and the main problem, what you and I deal with all the time, they cry and say, help us. We cannot be profitable on PPO plans by procedure. We're upside down. Our profit margins are nothing. But here sits a non-covered service law in over 46 states in the nation, hopefully 47 coming up this year, of the ability to charge fairly for what they do, and they don't even know how to use that law to be able to increase net revenue.
And I think it goes back to what you were saying about the experience and the goal. I think that a lot of people are focused on, I can only do what the insurance tells me to do. And they see things as more of a constrictive kind of way of working of we can't do this instead of what can we do. And one of the things that really gets to me is when these dental team members are told, well, you signed a contract, so there's nothing you can do. But if you actually looked at that contract, you could see some really cool things that actually benefit providers and team members and patients as a result because you actually read the contract.
You're asking me to read a contract as a doctor? No way.
Yeah, and it gets a little boring, but that's where.
But looking for opportunities and not obstacles, which goes into the next segment that we want to talk about, is a dental insurance review.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like,
there's so much to talk about.
Dave, what you're alluding to is the fact that he knows in our practice, and any other practice been trained by us for sure, he wants what he wants. You want choice. Your insurance plan that you have through your company, the insurance companies set their reimbursement rates at what's termed LEPAT, or least expensive professionally accepted treatment, which is using the least expensive stuff that we have out there. Two things happen. Either the dentist understands that and they order the cheapest crowns, the cheapest materials, the least expensive cotton rolls and 2x2s, okay? And they try to increase profitability based upon that rule and regulation, or they are using, which we find most dentists are using, mid-grade inexpensive dental implants.
Mm-hmm.
They're using the cheapest crowns on the market that are clinically acceptable, but not necessarily the best or the most matchy, okay? Or we see a lot of them using high-end composites that are at $40 a gram versus the baseline nanos that are at $14 to $15 a gram. So they're using the better stuff and they're taking it in the shorts, and they don't understand why their cash flow is so decreased and why their supply bill is so high. So they work on that supply bill to crunch it down and race to the bottom instead of learning to offer you choice. Dave, you want LEPAT? Or do you want the more expensive professionally accepted treatment? It's your choice. This stuff is prettier, stronger, lasts longer, better overall, but shouldn't it be your choice?
Well, and it should, for sure, right? I mean, that's the age that we live in, but at the same time, I don't think they feel like their patients will trust them, even though, once your patients had like buffering or had dexamethasone with their crown treatment, right? I mean,
root canal extraction.
You explain that to me like you did.
Yeah.
And that, here's the benefits, and guess what? You're right. And so now every time, hopefully I'll never have one again, but every time, I'm going to have something like that happen, I want that. I trust you, and I have no problem paying for it.
See, and I think that that's where the
Wait,
insurance
did he
companies,
say he has no problem paying an additional fee
no.
for
And
more expensive professionally accepted treatment, or what's termed MPAT by our
Yeah.
company?
Well, it's the
And
experience.
but Dave, you're an insured patient. We can't charge you anything more beyond the code.
that's the misconception. And I think that that goes back to the trust concept that you just said, because these insurance companies are a business, and they are marketing themselves. We talk about this during the training. And if I were an insurance company, what can I do to market who I am and market myself to these clients, patients of ours? Um, I'm going to talk about the savings. So I want to save money for you. That's my value that I'm going to offer. I'm not going to pay very much because I don't get very much in premiums from you as a patient. So I'm going to depend on my ability to manipulate the verbiage on the EOBs, try to manipulate the doctor and the team into writing things off that they really shouldn't be writing off. Anything I can do to make it look like I'm saving you money and protecting you against the evil dentist, I'm going to do what I can. And I think that's where we need to start looking at it from a dental perspective and business perspective of you're our patients and you need to be able to trust us to give you the right information and to be there for you regardless of what insurance companies say. And part of that is being accurate with your treatment planning, making sure that you know these state laws and are able to push back in a way that helps you offer and give the best quality that you can, but also know your rights and push back when you need to with these insurance companies and not buckle.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
ultimately, if the patients push back on a small charge, and we know in the dental industry or in the practice that is a non-covered charge, we need to hold our ground because we are speaking truth to our patients. We are required to collect that portion per state law. The minute we start backing out and saying, well, I'll just write it off this time, Dave, patient Dave. The minute you start doing that, you think you're doing a favor to patients, but you're not. You're actually breaking down that trust because I'm obviously willing to back off from charging you for something that I deserve, because I don't want
It
you to
must
feel
be an
bad.
illegitimate
So it must be an
charge. If you're
illegitimate
backing
charge.
off of it,
Yeah.
then it must not be a real charge, and you're just trying to gouge me.
Oh, yeah.
Yet these practices have no idea what their direct operating costs per hour are. They have no idea whether they're profitable by procedure. And they're like running the hamster wheel on the hygiene department, having the hygienist run double, triple hygiene, and trying to make up for lost profitability on the procedures because of insurance reimbursements.
But because Dave trusts us, he knows that we are going to charge when appropriate and not charge when it's not.
And we're
And
so worried if he pushes back, he's going to write a bad Google review,
it's okay.
right?
He's
And
aligned.
or we might lose a patient. So the dentist is it's a double-edged sword. It's like if the patient complains, we better write it off. We're going to lose them. If we charge an additional fee and the insurance company pushes back on us and we don't have the know-how how to push back against them and say, no, you can't do that per your contract. But then let's go to the state of Washington. Let's
Yeah.
go to the
But
state
hold on
of
for a second.
Oh yeah, before.
But I also might, taking your example a little bit farther, I also might not come to your practice anymore if, I have a horrible anesthetic experience, or,
Your root
my,
canal hurts for days and days.
or months,
Or months,
right?
Yeah.
Or, my feeling, is sensitive to hot and cold for way too long, right? So
Right.
all of those things which can be helped by additional services
Yeah.
Right.
can also, lose patients. And so I think that balance of, what's best. I don't keep track of, I do because I'm kind of in the
You're that
business, but,
person.
I don't keep track of all of the innovations that are coming out, which are happening more and more often due to technology. I don't keep track of that. You keep track of that. I want you to be able to say to me, to my family, it's like, this is the best way to do it. This is going to be your best experience. Here's what I would do. And I think that's how everyone wants to be treated. And I think that's the winning experience or the winning recipe for a practice to be successful.
And now you live in the state of Washington or Oklahoma and Hawaii, Dave.
We have a
And
different experience for you.
and so now, currently, as of right now, Delta Dental of Washington, Delta Dental of Oklahoma, and then Hawaii Dental Services, which is controlled by Delta Dental of Washington. Am I correct in saying
That's
that?
correct.
They state that the dental offices that are part of their network of providers cannot charge you for value-added service. That you are only allowed. Now, again, the mentality of the dentist will say, well, I want to put a better product in, or I want to use better, medications, materials, technology. But these three entities are not reimbursing me enough to be able to provide that technology, and write in their contracts for years, which we have copies of them, and we have recorded conversations with their representatives stating that, yes, I can offer you value-added service, but I'm not allowed to charge you for that. Now,
Yes.
before I was allowed to charge you, but not now. 3 years ago, yes. 2 years and 364 days ago, no. It's like all of a sudden they decide to create what I call a socialistic, nearly communistic role of dentistry. And so the dentists up there, they're like caught between a rock and a hard place, watching their salaries drop, can't pay their teams what their teams want, and they are financially suffering in their practices because these entities are controlling. All the other insurance companies up there in Washington or Oklahoma or Hawaii, they do not tell their panel dentists that they cannot offer value-added service and charge the patient an agreed-upon fee for the value-added service and have you sign consent for that service. In fact, Delta Dental of 15 or 17 states. We know that Delta Dental of California, Utah, Texas, and a plethora of other states have it in their contract how to offer patients value-added service and what has to be done and what is the protocol in doing so. They don't control the quality of deliverable dentistry I'm able to give you, but they do in the other 3 states. And the thing that's frustrating to me is, where are the association leadership? We're the leaders of their state associations. And Tracy and I have contacted the ADA, and the ADA is very aware of this. And it's like, well, who do you guys think you are? You think you're so big that you can tell the ADA what to do? No, we're just like a little David, and we know you're the Goliath. And I know how that story ended. And it's like, if you guys don't start addressing the elephant in the room sooner than later, you're going to continue to see membership drop. In fact, Dave, Tracy, I had a physician call me who's been listening to my podcasts. And the physician called and said, Rob, you don't know me. I listen to your podcast. I'm not a dentist. I have friends that are dentists that listen to your podcast, but I listen to your podcast. And you need to keep on these associations. Otherwise, the ADA is going to end up just like the American Medical Association with 12% membership, and they're a useless entity. And I'm like, holy cow, thanks for listening. But it was really interesting how he made that correlation of how medical insurance has controlled medical so much to a degree. Here in Utah, they're starting to offer choice, which Tracy and I have been privileged to be able to have better medications and materials. We've had to pay for it out of pocket. But these insurance companies are not allowing the dentist to even offer that. And
Well,
so,
let me just speak a little
yeah,
bit more frankly and clearly for the audience here. So here's what's
you're
going
going to be
on.
bad cop and speak candid like
I'm
me.
just going to be very candid with what's happening here.
Okay.
So if you look at your contract right now with your insurance company, specifically Delta Dental, it will say we reimburse for the least expensive professionally accepted treatment.
If you read your contract.
If you read it. So that means when you do this procedure, it's using the cheapest of everything, least expensive. And we're not talking specifically about, oh yeah, you could have done silver. It's no, that composite material that you use, there's a reason why it only lasts or can be replaced every 2 to 5 years. This is a baseline procedure, baseline material, baseline everything. But the problem is on your point, there are more expensive professionally accepted treatment that's out there that's better for the prognosis, right? It can last longer, it can be more beautiful.
Tracy, I heard the argument the other day too that composites, there's a proliferation of composites out there, and according to research, all of them are looking really good and they're lasting a long time. But it's not just the material, and there are differences in material
Oh, yeah.
still, but it's also the time engaged. Docs, your time is valuable. Hygienists, team members, your time is valuable. So just like one of our clients said, I'm not rushed to do composite fillings. I'm slowing down. I'm actually putting in beautiful anatomy and making sure everything's contoured perfectly. And he said, I'm actually doing a better job because I'm charging fairly and I'm getting paid fairly. And his last statement, am I being too honest?
Yes.
So it's not just, it's the materials for sure, but it's also the time engaged in designing the crowns on your CAD/CAM technology, on the placement, and doing everything, just slowing down so mistakes aren't made. Uh-oh, did I just reveal a huge issue in dentistry? If we go too
Definitely.
fast,
Well,
mistakes are made sometimes.
moving from that LEPAT service, we have to think about, well, just like any other business, how do you offer those better things and make it very clear to the patient that your insurance company will reimburse me for a baseline LEPAT way of doing the service, but there's a more expensive way of doing it that I recommend because of A, B, and C, and it's your choice, patient.
Well, we could speak candidly because
And
Straumann and Nobel are very expensive, but they have great track records.
yes,
And it's like there's other implants out there. Straumann, Nobel, and Ankylose are the only 3 implants, last study I saw, that don't have leaking attachments. Everybody else leaks, which harbors bacteria, but let's not go there.
well, and what I wanted to say is the ADA actually did make a statement on enhancements. And the reason why I bring this up is if the ADA has a stance on these more expensive things, why is it that Delta Dental is taking the stance of you can't offer and charge for these better things? They're already included in our fee, but they've already said their fee is for the least expensive. So you
But
can't have it both
but our
ways.
fee includes whatever product or medication or material you want to place, doctor. So if you want to place the best, our fee is already included in that. But right in the black and white there it says, our
Least.
fees are made for the least expensive professionally accepted treatment.
Now,
I
here's
love
where
that
it
you
gets
brought that
interesting
up,
with the
Trace.
ADA, and this is where I want the ADA to make sure that they take the stance to protect the providers and their patients, and allow them the freedom to choose these things. But in one of our letters from the American Dental Association, it stated, the treating dentist is the individual who, using his or her clinical training and experience, determines the services to be rendered. So obviously, patient, you need a filling or a crown. At the time of delivery, the dentist would determine, using the full CDT code entry as well as the classification of materials and other tables, which code is appropriate for documenting the procedure. So obviously, if you do a composite filling, then you're going to be, or to surface, you're going to be documenting accordingly. Now,
Correct.
this is where it gets interesting. A decision to bill for additional fees for enhancements, example, materials, metal, the cost of gold, is a business decision of the practice that is not supported by the CDT code. So the reason why I bring this up,
Right.
there is no CDT code for enhanced materials, or in that case, they mentioned cost of gold, etc. Because of it, the insurance companies cannot state that those enhancements are included in a CDT code.
They would be a non-covered service.
It is by definition a non-covered service. And so this is where it gets frustrating to me, is we need to start questioning and answering and asking these questions and holding people and associations
Holding the associations accountable.
to protect us when it comes to situations like this, because now these dentists are calling us from Oklahoma, Hawaii, and in Washington State saying, so am I really only allowed to do the baseline because I can't afford to do the better stuff? It's not fair to me to absorb the cost of these better, more expensive things.
But
and so Delta's
you
putting
signed
me,
a contract.
yes.
It's on you.
And how
According to the
often-
associations, you signed a contract. Yet these are laws, non-covered service laws, downcoding, bundling protection laws, and any other laws that we bring forth that associations can bring forth, just like Tennessee bringing forth our law.
Yes.
Good for them. Where's the other myriad of states?
And so
You know?
my big thing with having this discussion is, number one, we need to figure out how these providers need to address these issues. And again, it's only 3 states. But I feel horrible about these 3 states and these doctors feeling that they're limited to what they can offer patients. And so I'm recommending, number 1, no, you do the LEPAT services according to your service
Contract.
agreement.
Yeah.
And those offices, and this is where I'm going to be a little bit more candid, if you're going to purchase more expensive materials and technologies in order to do something being reimbursed at the LEPAT, you're not making a very good business decision. And that's going to force you to compromise when it comes to paying your employees, cramming the schedule, and yeah, speed impedes quality.
It's all focused on patient care, and I love that altruistic focus.
And we
But
want to
also,
take care of the
but it's
patients,
also
of
in
course,
running a business
like a
and
business.
being able to pay your team fairly, being able to fund your retirement account docs, being paid fairly. Is there? I mean, does it, doesn't anybody realize that the average wage of the dentist continues to decrease and decrease and decrease year after year?
Well, and that goes to allowing the patients to understand what's going on under their noses and what plans they have chosen to pay or at least reduce the benefit charges, but not pay so much on it. But I think that from a dental perspective, the dentist in those states should be very honest and forthcoming with the patient, saying, "Listen, Dave, you signed up for this plan. This plan reimburses me for the least expensive way to do it. They will not allow me to offer and charge you for better ways of doing the procedure, even though I love it. I can't do that per my contract, and I'm going to be kicked out if I do that. So unfortunately, I have to do the cheap way of doing that procedure to you. Everybody else gets choice, but you don't." Now, when you start being honest with patients and you start telling them the story and saying, "This is why I can't do this,"
If we were in Washington, Oklahoma, or Hawaii,
oh, in a
that would be the
heartbeat.
story that every dentist should tell their patient.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We
I'm
are
sorry.
we
You
are
get, you
being
get,
forced to
yeah.
discriminate against you, Dave,
And it
because you
is a
have this insurance.
discriminatory clause for sure. And then here's the other killer. Here's here's Idaho and Montana. They don't even have state insurance commissioners where they can even file a complaint. We have a really good one here in Utah, but that's just 2 states. I'm sure there's other states,
I think
Trace,
there are other states.
that do not have state insurance
So
commission
again, to
departments where
reiterate,
where insurance companies are breaking the law, such as Washington. Dentists have filed complaints with the Washington State Insurance Commission, and what have they done with those
oh,
complaints?
nothing.
Buried them.
But here's the deal. We have helped clients in Idaho and Montana, and we've identified times where they have broken state law. The insurance companies have broken state law, specifically non-covered laws, and it warrants a complaint against the insurance companies to hold them accountable. And we've actually called, and they've said, "Well, we don't take complaints from providers. We only take complaints from patients." And so that's where it gets frustrating is these insurance companies are doing whatever they want, and there's nothing that we can do to hold them accountable
No,
right now.
and I'm just going to call out the associations
Mm-mm.
again. This is where the dental association executives need to understand and represent their constituents
Mhm.
and get these types of things in play like we have here in Utah
Yeah, in a
and
heartbeat.
other states.
And I do know that I've been told by a few of the associations that they need to involve the attorney general to make this happen. Great, then let's do
Then
it.
get it going.
Let's stop
What do you
talking
wait?
about it
Yes,
and get it done.
stop being talkers, be doers, right?
Yeah.
So
I
and
wanted
then
to move forward about dropping insurance because this is going to be an interesting one that's been told
but
a
it's
lot.
because I complain to the association, and the associations will say, but Rob, you signed a contract, there's nothing we can do. But here's our answer.
Drop insurance.
Drop insurance.
So the first thing is you signed a contract, and again, going back to what we were talking about, well, yeah, you did. Read the contract because there are so many great things that you actually can do that we're not even talking about. And know the contract, read it before you sign it, and that'll definitely help with making some decisions. But going on to the drop insurance, I've been in dental offices where the patient has come in or called and said, "I love my dentist. I've been with my dentist for 20 years and my dentist is the best ever, but they're no longer in my insurance with my insurance plan, so I need to go somewhere else." And that's where it gets frustrating to me because obviously the patient has a stronger connection with their insurance company
Than they do
than
the
the provider. And
provider.
so that's where it makes me really sad is what are we saying and doing to enforce that relationship with the insurance companies instead of us?
Well, my mind just went off on a tangent here for a second because I'm thinking to myself, y- the first thing that happens if I send in a letter to
Mhm.
the insurance company and I state I'm dropping you, what's the first thing they do?
They're
They
going to
write,
send out a
they're
letter
sending
to
out a
the
letter
patients.
to the patient saying, okay, well, Rob dropped the insurance, but Tracy and Dave, they're providers,
Mhm.
for the plan, and we recommend you go there because you're going to save so much money. Just like on the EOBs, they want you to send in your fee-for-service fee to show the huge discount that you get by being a part of their insurance plan, but they certainly don't highlight out of the $2,500 bill that I billed them, they don't highlight that they only covered $685 of it.
Mhm.
They don't want to highlight that. They want to show that by being in the plan, you saved $2,600, because it would
That's
cause me to write off over 40%.
That's what we're talking about. So we've noticed that the insurance companies are doing a few things to kind of manipulate. The first one is that argument, send in your full fee for service fee. That's going to help us figure out trends and we're going to reimburse you accordingly. And they're going to figure out from there how much your office is going to get reimbursed based on norms, right? But the question is what do they ask for when you first sign up? They ask for your fee for service fees. So they already
Right.
have it that time. Then when you negotiate, they ask for your fee for service fee, so they have it a second time, a third time, a fourth time.
But if I'm sending it in on the
Well,
EOBs,
and
should they
then
have it?
you've got additional offices. It's not just you. Every day, an office is trying to either negotiate or increase or start up a credential with them. They're constantly being given fee for service fees from the area that they can monitor. And so that's the time
Do their
when they should be
comparisons,
doing
yeah.
the comparison, figuring out the fees. And so we have to think to ourselves, well, if they've already received it, why are they asking for it on these EOBs? Because you don't need them if you're already using them to negotiate or to credential. And so, yes, we know, and we can't really disclose our sources, but we do know that when they ask for us to submit our fee for service fees, it's not to increase the rates, the reimbursements. It's to show you, Dave, the patient, how much you're saving. And offices are starting to get smart with this. They're actually starting, like they should, to every year update their fee schedules. You absolutely should do that. You should be calling, am I due for an increase regularly? You should be checking with them at least every November and in our state, March, and then again in July with certain entities to see whether or not you're due for an increase or an increase is going to happen. So we're up to date and we know exactly what we billed and what we should be receiving as a result. So from an accounting perspective, it's great.
When we send in our contracted fees.
When we send in our agreed upon fees for covered services.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's happening. Offices are starting to do this, and it's working wonderfully because their write-offs are dropping. They're realizing they are still getting increases from insurance companies. We actually got a great one recently that I haven't even told you about. It was an insurance company. We've never submitted our fee for service fees ever to them. And the amount of money that I was able to negotiate, you're going to be pretty happy for
Significant.
Christmas.
Ah,
But it's because we know how to negotiate with them, and there are other things that we can do to get higher reimbursements. But the insurance companies are starting, specifically Delta Dental of Washington again, they're starting to change things in the provider handbooks. So officially, I heard last week, dentists are being told that they are required to submit their full fee for service fees on claims, no exceptions, or you risk breaking the contract and going out of
and
network.
getting kicked out
And
of the
so
network.
there's that risk.
Yeah.
Then we had people saying, well, I'll just go out of network, and the insurance companies will probably pay close to, if not more than, what they paid before when
Right.
I was in network. And I just found out that Delta Dental is making changes where they are only paying 25% of what they normally would have paid, or 25% of the claim. I'm unsure of the
If you're
details,
out
but
of
it's if
network,
you are out of network,
and
they
then
are reimbursing
the patient has to pay the rest.
25%,
Patient pays 75%.
which incentivizes the patient to go to an in-network
Oh
provider.
my gosh.
And so we're seeing all this
Now,
happen.
if you think about it, that's brilliant. That's
Oh,
a
yeah,
brilliant business strategy for the insurance companies, no
totally.
doubt. But in defense of them, they have to increase their premiums if we want higher reimbursement rates. And they're in such a competitive field with all the other insurance companies, they're never going to increase reimbursement rates commensurate with being profitable by procedure.
No.
That's just not going to happen.
Well, and what they've done is we have overturned what's called the McCarran-Ferguson Act. It's a collusion law that finally got overturned a couple of years ago. They have other ways that they communicate with each other when it comes to percentages that they reimburse instead of money. We know that they use policies where if they implement a new policy, other insurance companies are alerted. And so ultimately, through this indirect collusion, they kind of are selling the same product. You know, it's going to be that 1250 max. It's going to be a deductible. It's going to be alternate benefits. And so everything's pretty standardized.
They're not gonna cannibalize each other.
They're not.
They're not gonna get competitive and have a higher,
And
you
so,
know,
well, and if you think about
coverage
it,
table or
they
anything
have
like
a
that.
very similar product. Their premiums are very similar. Their reimbursement is very similar. And so when you have companies that are competing with each other and they have a very similar product, they have to compete with price, pure competition.
Right.
And so they have to keep those premiums low, because if Dave has two options and those plans are exactly the same, he's going to pick the cheaper of the two. It's just what he's going to do. And so we know that because they're competing this way, there's very little they can do when it comes to reimbursing more, because that would require an increase in premiums. And they're not willing to do that and risk patients going somewhere else. But we have to think about what we're doing in dentistry.
And that's the whole issue. And this is where I think that the associations have failed. One, you have to train your team.
Yeah.
And what do you train them on? They have to know they've got to know the insurance contracts that are never read in any practice. More specifically, they need to understand their state laws and how to push back. They need to treat their dental practice like any other business. Like any business would run, dentists have got to run their businesses the same. And I don't care if it's what you and I have noticed. I don't care if it's a solo practice. I don't care if it's a corporate practice with 10 to 20 offices. I don't care if it's a DSO or an IDSO. The problem is the same with all of them. Even these corporate entities, we can run the practices better because we have the corporate skills. No, you don't. You definitely don't, because you don't understand contracts. You don't understand state laws. You don't know how to be profitable by procedure. So don't tell me that you're better. I would rather take a solo practice or small group practices and teach them how to be profitable, because their minds are open. They want to work harder. They want to be profitable by procedure so that they can make more money and be able to provide the best level of care that their training allows. And so all these bigger corporate entities, they just do the same status quo stuff over and over again, right? And you've got to hold insurance companies responsible.
Yes.
And that's where we come in. We do. Most of the battles we win, literally 95%, I know.
Yep.
5% we can't.
It's the worst when we lose.
Yeah,
but,
and it
you know,
might
we
be
would lose.
because it's some weird thing in their contract, but it's usually the federal and ERISA plans.
Yeah.
And that's the killer.
Well,
So dental insurance in review, on that topic, is there anything that we haven't talked about?
I think that the main concern is those offices that make the decision to drop insurance. Number one, realize that you're going to be mitigating the damage.
You're going to lose patients.
Patients are going to leave. The other thing too is on Dave's point, you mentioned, I trust my doctor. I trust that what you're going to offer me is correct. And we've heard stories of offices saying, oh, we accept all insurances. When a patient calls up asking, do you take my insurance?
Yeah.
And we know that the patient's asking, are you in network?
And they're not.
And you're starting that relationship off with misinformation when you say, yeah, we accept all insurances. And so you're not going to keep patients if you are manipulating them from the beginning with that phone call. And so be honest, be upfront with your patients, especially if you're out of network. I think that's a huge deal. Um,
Let's,
so,
let's shift gears to ADA support. What are
okay.
they, you're on this, what are they doing about ERISA plans?
Well, ERISA plans, first of all, for those of you who are not familiar with them, please reach out and you can call us directly at our office and we can talk about this. But ERISA plans, ultimately, we need to just understand that these plans are not considered to be insurance. Now, they walk like a duck, they talk like a duck. They
They will,
hold you to a contract. They distribute funds very similar to an insurance. They have their name on there, but there's ultimately a clause that states that the states cannot deem ERISA plans to be insurance. And so whenever we pass state laws that
right.
hold these insurance companies responsible, ERISA plans, self-funded plans, federal plans are not required to adhere to those state laws. It's disheartening.
Which infringes on the profitability of every dental practice out there.
Absolutely.
And
Because they can make any change they want in the contract and not be held accountable. It's very difficult to file complaints
so
against an ERISA plan.
what's the ADA doing? What's the update? We went from the Docs Act to
Yeah.
what other things going
So
on with them?
what's been really interesting, and I need to see if there's an update on it, but Oklahoma had, and I believe it was the pharmacies that were
Right,
going
that's what,
after
yeah,
an insurance company saying, no, you have to be held um,
accountable
accountable under our state law.
on a state level.
And Oklahoma, the courts determined that that's correct. ERISA plans in the state of Oklahoma have got to adhere to state law, which is a huge win and it sets precedents. And so right now, the ADA has officially decided to step forward and stick their necks out and try to see if we can get this to be a national decision with the Supreme Court. And so they have written a letter to the Supreme Court asking for there to be a ruling that ERISA plans are required to honor state laws. And I believe this is going to work because it does have precedence, but I'm frustrated at the same time that it took another entity to start the process.
And not the ADA taking the lead on it.
Mhm.
That's the problem.
Mhm.
What's the, I read some forecasting panel article that they had. I shared that with you, and
I don't really know what I read in that one. So the ADA is restructuring,
yeah,
in a sense. They're creating a task force, and I didn't know, but the ADA was not really voting on things um, more often than once a year. And so we wonder why changes have been so slow. It's because it's taking so long for them to actually address things. They're forecasting out 5 years. They weren't really, sorry, they were creating goals out 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
They were making decisions only yearly. And so it just nothing was happening. And so apparently this task force is being put together to more quickly create goals and address things in a timely manner. Um, my concern is they really didn't address in this notification the number one concern that we hear, which is insurance reimbursements.
Reimbursements, yeah,
I don't, they mentioned the drop in membership and addressing that.
yeah.
Increasing dentist value would be another one. But again, if you are showing that you're an advocate for these dentists and team members and you're protecting them and you're fighting for them, your value will ultimately increase significantly, which would warrant an increase in membership. So I don't quite know what's going to happen. I hope that they do the right thing. I worry about too many cooks in the kitchen.
Wh-
But I hope that they'll have the right mindset.
It's interesting. We all know that the ADA has a fiduciary interest with the insurance companies in the leasing of the codes and other things that they do. One of the things that I think is frustrating for you and I is it's like we meet with the ADA, we talk about how the insurance companies are defined, they try to define what bundling is, but they haven't. We gave the ADA a definition of unbundling, right?
Yes.
And
Okay.
the insurance companies are trying to define what unbundling is, and yet they won't You know, and I get it. They're a Goliath and they can't move quick.
But this
But
was an easy fix.
this is an easy fix because you gave them
It
the
did.
definition. You wrote the
So
definition for them.
so this is something that also, again, so Dave, I'm doing a lot of education today. Sorry about that. We do need to acknowledge that the ADA has created a statement, and we have it available for those who ask, from their Center for Professional Success, excuse me, what the definition of bundling is. So
Right.
this is in writing from the ADA, and we have to understand that bundling, insurance companies can't really, you know, turn around and redefine it because it's in writing. So, according to the ADA, claims bundling is the systematic combining of distinct dental procedures by a third party payer that results in reduced benefit for the patient beneficiary. So, two separate things. Right now, we're going to see crown and build up, and you combine them in order to pay less to the patient or beneficiary.
Which is just smart business on the third
Yeah,
party
well, we
payers
consider it to be inclusive. Okay.
because then they don't have to pay out as much,
Now,
and
the
that's just what they're trying to do.
ADA considers bundling of procedures to be potentially fraudulent.
That's
This
be
is
Yeah,
this
it's
is the big
because
deal.
I'm labeling out all the things that I did, and they're trying to combine it into one thing, and it doesn't define all the things that I did. So
Mhm.
that can actually come back to at me if anything should happen that is unfavorable
Well,
to the
and
patient.
I look at this and say, well, if bundling is potentially fraudulent, what would unbundling be?
Right.
And so we have to start kind of follow that logic. And what we're noticing is when an office says, no, I did a build up and I did a crown, all of a sudden the insurance companies start pointing fingers kind of accusingly, saying, oh, you're unbundling. And we've even seen deceptive billing practices like unbundling. And they're trying to put this negative intonation on unbundling. But if we follow what the ADA says, bundling itself is fraudulent potentially, then unbundling has to be not. And so what we did is we actually went to the ADA and put the definition of unbundling in according to what the definition of bundling was. So unbundling is the systematic separate billing of distinct dental procedures or CDT codes by a provider to properly document actual procedures completed. The ADA does not consider unbundling by providers to be fraudulent or misleading as long as the procedures were not a required element to complete another procedure. Now, this is where it's important because if I am a dentist and I need to do a crown, there's a separate crown for that. But not all crowns are needing or need a gingivectomy,
Correct.
right?
But some do.
But some do.
Yeah.
Gingivectomies are not required elements to do a crown. And so whenever you can say that, it is appropriate to separate those or unbundle
Or
those
clinical crown
services.
lengthening
Oh,
or,
you name it, right? And
any
so this is a very easy fix for the ADA to
define
fix
it.
and to
Yeah.
define
So that the insurance companies can't use it against us.
because we are now starting to see the insurance companies changing the word or the definition of unbundling according to what works for them. And we've got to stop that from happening. We need to stop it and have a clear definition on that. The other thing, too, that we're asking the ADA to do is add on to that statement on enhancements. They already have one. So why not add a section in there about MePAT services, so the more expensive professionally accepted
Yep.
treatment. And so
Exactly.
we did mention that as well. Hopefully the ADA will listen and realize that this is a time for them to explain to these providers that they can offer choice, they can charge appropriately. It is not unbundling, and they're there to protect them. And hopefully, again, maybe with this new task force, maybe they'll do it.
I want to go from the ADA, our national association. Let's drill down into the state association here just real quick before we talk about stuff we're working on. One of the things that's frustrating to me is, again, the associations they're not teaching the state laws. They're not teaching how to apply the state laws. And heaven forbid they have somebody on staff that actually understands insurance contracts and what's in the contract, which we stated with Delta Dental not of Washington, Oklahoma, or Hawaii, but Delta Dental of other states, allowing you, Dave, to have choice in your healthcare and to be able to charge for what that choice might be. The thing that's frustrating to me, and we saw this with the ADA years ago, you know, really pushing to have, you know, dentists to drop insurance plans. But dental insurance is a multi-billion-dollar industry. They're not going anywhere. They're going to continue to offer a product to the consumer, and we have to, I think, more importantly, instead of beating up the insurance companies, which we've all talked about, we learn to work with them.
Yeah.
And we learn that just means the dentist has to be a better business person. The dentist has to understand their products. They have to understand what they can and can't do with contracts, unless you're in one of those 3 states, which they're altering their contracts at will and breaking state laws, and their state associations are allowing that to happen. Thank goodness other states don't function like that. But one of the things that frustrated me was the fact that in our state association, it's always been at our various meetings, you know, there's one way to do it. There's a company that teaches how to be profitable with insurance plans, but we want to show you that it's better to just start dropping insurance plans. And what you alluded to, the mitigating the damage of dropping insurance plans, they don't talk about that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that many of our clients called in and talked about was the fact that in our association leadership was implying to drop insurance plans and showing the process by which to do so, and what one dentist, how they increased in net revenue. And what was really interesting to me is they showed an increase, this dentist, who I like him, he's one of our association leaders, but he showed that over a 10-year period of time, he increased 55%. And I'm thinking to myself, if you're fee for service, you have full control over your fees. And if over a 10-year period of time, you only increase 55%, that's a 5.5% increase per year. And I'm like, the cost of living index, you should have been increasing by 5% a year, you know, lifting your fees 5%. So what, your actual net return is a 0.5%? I mean, any MBA program
You're right.
would go over that and say, that's not a good place to be. Yet all of our clients that we train, we teach them by working with the insurance companies, by using the insurance contracts and understanding them and understanding your direct operating cost per hour and applying that to, am I profitable by procedure with the amount of time I have to do the procedure? Am I making enough? And if I can't, how can I make more? And yet that's been our mantra, to teach that. And it's stated, well, Rob, we can't get everybody to train with you guys. Okay, great. So we won't teach them insurance contracts, but at least teach them state laws, which increases every practice out there. When we talk about just applying the state laws, that's about, what, a $7,000 to $12,000 a month increase just off the state laws to apply them. And our clients increase right out the chute. The average is 17 to 18% of their monthly cash flow increases by 17 to 18% and climbs up from there. And once they plane out at just an 80% application, what we train them on, they're at 27 to 34% increase right off the bat. And that doesn't include their annual increases on top of that, which ends up being, by not dropping the insurance plans, over a 10-year period of time, is like 75 to 85% increase.
Well, and why drop insurance if you're profitable with them? Your patients are happy because they have choice and they're able to see you. I'm happy because we're paid fairly for what we do. The insurance company is going to be happy either way because they're making their premiums, they're making their money, and they know that we know what the rules are. They know what the rules are. Sometimes we teach them the rules, but it's a win-win. When we drop insurance, it gets pretty ugly pretty
It's pretty
quickly.
dicey really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had to help out so many clients get back on the insurance plans when they come and train with us.
Yeah.
And they're so much happier.
And they make more
And they
money.
make more money than dropping. Okay, that's what I want to emphasize. You can actually make more money by working with the insurance companies and understanding your contracts and state laws than you can dropping them. And this is the kind of thing that's so frustrating to me with the associations is why isn't that taught? Why can't that be propagated? Why are they so afraid of it?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. That's why the insurance companies work with you, and that's why they don't care to talk
Yeah.
to the state
Again,
associations. I get it.
there are times where it is encouraged to drop insurance if they do not allow
We've dropped a
you.
plan or two.
Oh yeah, if
Yeah.
you can't be profitable with them, then absolutely drop insurance.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets fun.
Do you have
We figured it out.
Do you have anything else you want to? I'm just grateful. The state associations do some great things.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt.
Yes.
But what it comes right down to is profits and profitability, because nobody wants to address that topic.
Mm-hmm.
We do because we're a business training facility, we're a business training company, and we teach them business.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that dentists never have been taught.
Correct.
So anyway, so what are you working on? What are we working on here at MPMB? And because thank you, Tennessee and other states that are taking the things that we're doing here in Utah and copying them and applying them, getting them passed and applying them to your constituents and your associations. That's what grows associations. Actually teaching dentists the business side of dentistry, not just the clinical side. Yeah, the conventions are wonderful for doing that kind of stuff and your district meetings, great, that's wonderful. But that doesn't put butts in chairs, and that does not increase net revenue into the number one concern nationwide, and that's reimbursement rates, number one. Number two, language on EOBs. Number three, workforce problems with being able to hire people. And the interesting thing is if you're business trained, you don't have a problem with those three because you're profitable, you have cash flow, and you can pay team members a wage where they don't want to leave, and you can recruit the best talent.
Correct.
Wow. Okay, I just hammered it. So talk to me about copying Arizona laws with credit cards.
Yes. So what we're
This is what we're working on.
Okay, so part of what we do is keep the funds, some of the funds that we do for our training, and apply them towards legislation.
We want to thank all of our clients. Thank you for being clients, because the money that you pay us here, we take a percentage of that
and put it right back
towards legislation and things that protect you in our state and other states.
It requires constant involvement with clients and non-clients. So we have a touch point on what's currently happening, not just in Utah, but in other states, so that we know what is coming down the line and will eventually get us.
So what in Arizona, what cool thing do they do on credit cards?
We also involve lobbyists as well, and we have to make sure we have the right legislators. So people who are in other states that are interested in getting involved with legislation, be prepared that sometimes it can cost a little bit, but look how many great things you can do. And so over the course of the next year, we hope to do a few things. Number one, you're right, copying the Arizona law. Arizona passed a law last year, which was pretty powerful, and it talked about being automatically enrolled in credit card payments through insurance companies. And the issue that most offices have is you're not only taking a big giant hit, you're also being hit with credit card fees. And offices were insisting, no, I don't want to have credit cards. I want a paper check. It doesn't matter if it costs, it takes me a little bit more time. It keeps me from having to take a harder hit. There is law that states that you can opt out of credit card payments, but it didn't distinguish how quickly they could auto-enroll you back in. And so offices throughout the nation have been calling saying, I want to opt out. I don't want to use credit cards. And usually it's through a third party that has multiple insurances underneath them. So they're handling a lot of claims through different insurances. So I would call an insurance company or a third party, a credit card company, excuse me, and I would state, I don't want credit cards for this particular insurance. Okay, we'll opt you out. Well, who else do you have who also is paying me with credit cards because I want to opt out from them as well? Well, we can't release that information. You have to call as you receive these payments. So there's hurdle number one. The second one is if a team member accidentally puts a card through, it will automatically re-enroll you into the process pretty much for everybody.
Oh my gosh.
So then the third thing is that they were auto-enrolling you again after 3 months regardless. And so these front office team members have pretty much thrown up their hands saying, I can't keep making these phone calls. So Arizona passed a law that ultimately said if you opt out of using credit cards, they cannot get you back in unless you have written consent asking them to put you back in.
What?
How beautiful is that?
Brilliant.
Now, I want to add a little bit extra on the end of that, stating that they have to release the name of all the insurance companies that also are in that particular credit card company's list, so that we can opt out en masse. So that's what I want to add on to that.
Nice.
That should be pretty easy, especially it's easier to copy laws than it is to do new laws. And so this is where I get excited.
Okay, this next one you're working on.
Next one I'm working on.
This is a really pet peeve of mine.
When insurance companies take money from other patients because of their overpayment.
Their mistake.
Their mistake. They pay too much.
They can't say, hey, look, send us a check. We overpaid you on a patient. Send us a check with this reference number back. And instead,
they take it from a completely random patient. And so now we have an issue because we have to track that the money was paid to that new patient, but it was taken from that patient and put into another account, which potentially it's being done a lot incorrectly, which is violating HIPAA. The second thing is most offices are pretty good about giving refund checks to insurance companies. We don't want to be in a position of having that negative perception from insurances to us. We want to be compliant. The other thing that we just heard the other day is an insurance company was actually taking money from a patient who had seen another office.
Oh my,
and they paid that office too much money.
Oh my gosh.
And they were taking it from the new office that had nothing to do with it. And so we need to get this under control is the bottom line with this. They need to just ask for the money. Doctors need to have a certain amount of time in order to process and refund the insurance company back, confirm that it's a legitimate refund, just like the insurance companies. And the insurance companies are allowed a year to ask for money back. We should have some time to be able to pay them back in a timely manner. So there's that.
And dispensing.
You want to talk about that one?
Well, this one's really frustrating because I remember when I took a docs class to do oral sedation and all the meds that we use in oral sedation, we had to keep accurate records of and accurate records of dispensing the medications to the patient, right? It was just a protocol to keep on top of that.
Was it hard?
And it wasn't hard at all. And so in the state of Utah, and all of you in other states ought to just take a look
and make sure.
Make sure, yeah. But dentists in the state of Utah are the only healthcare providers that aren't allowed to dispense. Meaning, if I have a prescription fluoride that I purchased from Patterson Dental, in the state of Utah, it's illegal for me to actually give that to the patient to take home.
Correct.
If I open it up and I have them put some on and I teach them how to brush with it.
You administered it.
I administered the fluoride, and now that tube has been open. The recommendation from leadership is now I can give that tube to the patient because it's theirs.
Yes.
To take home.
But you charged for the administration, not for the
I charged for the administration. Yes, exactly.
That goes with Servitec.
But yeah, I mean, there's all these medications. You could say lidocaine.
You could. Well, you're administering that one. You're not giving it to the patient.
But the thing is I'm purchasing it. Exactly. Am I dispensing it to the patient or am I administering it?
So dispensing is going to be packaging for resale.
Exactly.
And so, but if you look at like Servitec or chlorhexidine.
But we can administer whatever.
You're allowed to.
And so I ought to be able to buy any medication that I want and administer it to a patient based upon the need.
And dispensing
But dispensing versus administering, this is the big hiccup.
How silly.
The pharmacists
we need to clarify it, and we need to add dentists to the list. That's the bottom line.
Dentists. prohibit insurance companies from forcing write-offs for needed
Oh.
services done.
Oh, this is fun. We
Yeah,
already see
due
this.
due to their requirements not being met.
So what
So
we're noticing is throughout the nation, insurance companies were at first falling back on the covered. Oh, it's not covered, but you still have to write it off. Now we have the bundling law that's starting to take charge and be copied in other states that says, well, if it's covered and you try to force us to write it off from bundling, it's still the patient's responsibility. So that's not working for them. So now that they cannot force write-offs for covered services and they can't force write-offs for non-covered services, they're changing their requirements. So what they're doing, an example would be um, pockets for perio patients. So in order to diagnose,
yeah,
3 things have to happen, right? You know that. 4 millimeter pockets,
bleeding on probing,
bleeding on probing,
radiographic bone
and
destruction.
radiographic bone destruction.
And so now they're changing the rules of
They're
engagement.
changing the rules. And so as a provider, you need to treat this infection when those requirements have been met per the standards of care and what your training is. But the insurance companies are now saying, we're going to wait until the patient's pockets have gotten worse to 6 millimeters, then we will pay for it. But until then, if you treat the patient before that time, it is not payable and it's not
And
billable.
not billable to the patient.
So the doctor now has a choice. You either do it for free or you don't do it and you risk a patient suing you for malpractice.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
They've crossed the line.
So we want to pass a law that states that if the insurance companies do not cover something based on their requirements not being met, they still cannot force the dentist to write off that service. Now, this argument of the doctors being held liable or we're watching these doctors because they do horrible things. No, doctors are held and they're held accountable by the state entity with the licensing board.
Department of Occupational and Professional Licensing.
If there's a patient that feels that something is being done that is not supposed to be done by the dentist, then that's that avenue to hold that doctor responsible. And yeah, licenses can be lost. But when the insurance companies jump in and start saying, because it doesn't meet our requirements, we're going to force the write-off. Now they're becoming the entity to oversee the quality of care from these doctors and put the doctors at risk.
And everything from, there's infection in the tissue, but there's not enough radiographic bone loss, or the patient needs to build up on a crown to be able to have perfect retention of the crown, but there's not enough damage to the tooth, so we're not going to allow the buildup. And the list just goes on and
Well,
on.
and doctors have said, if
And
I don't get paid for it, I'm not going to do it. And
Yeah.
that's not fair to the patient.
No, exactly. ERISA plans in
ERISA
Utah.
plans.
Can we copy Oklahoma?
I'm curious.
Now, I'm not talking about Oklahoma, Delta Dental of
Oh, no,
Oklahoma.
not
We
at
don't
all.
want to copy that backwards
But what
operation
I'm
from
curious
them. But
is Oklahoma has set precedents.
they have.
And so there's nothing keeping us in the state of Utah to set precedents as well when it comes to ERISA plans.
To be able, because the state of Oklahoma, they were able to state
That ERISA
in their
plans were
courts
required to follow state law.
law.
And so if we wait until this becomes a federal thing, we might be waiting a long time. But what if we were to be the first state in Utah or in the states to actually hold these ERISA plans accountable for dental? I think that'd be really fun.
That would be cool.
Okay, what's the other one?
I know it's been an issue for general anesthesia for minors under the age of 7. The pedodontists in the state of Utah have been fighting this for a long time because these younger patients, they need to actually go under general anesthesia for work to be done, but the insurance companies are not paying for
They're
the
not.
general
And
anesthesia.
46 states have in their law that the insurance companies are required to cover general anesthesia for children,
But not in Utah.
but not Utah.
So congratulations all you other states, as forward thinking and as forward acting as we are in Utah. We still have one backwards situation here that we're dealing with, and,
We are.
and we're working that. Require insurance commissioner to
Oh.
release publicly the details on each insurance company that had complaints, the reason for the complaint, whether or not it was pursued, and what the outcome was.
I am hearing other states
are doing-
passing laws, and I
are
love
doing
this.
that, yeah.
If you could publicly post something saying this insurance company has had 150 different complaints in the state, and you can go case by case and figure out whether or not they were issued a fine, were they cleared of it, what was the basis of the complaint. I think it's going to be very helpful for the public to see whether or not it's an insurance company that they want to participate with. And secondly, as a provider, if you see an exorbitant amount of complaints from a particular insurance companies that they've had problems with, that would help me determine whether or not I wanted to work with them.
And also as an HR department, we've talked about this in those 3 said states with Delta. If the HR departments really fully understood the implications of what those insurance companies are pushing onto the dentists in how to treat their employees, how Delta's forcing their employees to receive dental care under their plan. I mean, if the public really knew, that would be an outcry.
Oh, it would.
And so it's like, I love the fact that if these things can come out and I'm not a big fan of the court of public opinion until laws are being broken. And then, yeah, I am a fan of the court of public opinion, and so it's that would be awesome. And
if we could do that.
And
it's easy.
if the HR departments of companies knew what was going on in Oklahoma and Washington and Hawaii, they'd think twice of getting Delta. They would go with Blue Cross, Cigna, Aetna, MetLife, anybody. All those insurance companies allow choice. All of them allow the doctor to provide the highest level of care, Dave, which you mentioned. They allow you to choose and pay out of pocket for additional services, which is the more ethical thing to do all the way around. So that's
So the last one I'm really thinking about, and I really like, is these insurance companies have a habit of manipulating verbiage on EOBs. Now, we can't standardize it. We're not big enough for that. The ADA is talking about it.
Yeah.
But what I can recommend is if a particular code is not covered under the plan, they can no longer say we think it should be included or not billable. They need to clearly state this is a non-covered code and the patient is responsible.
Well, which House Bill 359 says they have to state clearly why
they chose not to pay for it, but it does not say that they're required to put it being a covered code or not. And so I think that if we can hold their feet to the fire and force them to clearly state that it is a non-covered code, I think that's going to be very helpful with patients not being manipulated into thinking that write-off should happen that shouldn't be written off. So that's something that I'd like to work on.
Awesome. Well, one last thing in review. Legislation Day is on Friday, February 28th.
Yes.
And do you want to tell everybody?
We are going to be on Capitol Hill. So we will be speaking a little bit. The Utah Dental Association, as well as some other leaders, are going to be there. We want to talk to these legislators. We want to explain to them some of the issues that we're having, some of the patients that are struggling as a result of insurance companies. And the more we can get involved with our legislation, the better it will be. And so we are pushing for as many people as possible to be with us on Capitol Hill first thing in the morning on that Friday. And we are very excited to get a larger group behind us pushing forward and making Utah a very innovative state when it comes to passing state laws and protecting our patients as well.
Protecting the dentists and the patients that they serve, for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. So having said that, this was a longer visit, but it was worthwhile having these discussions. And Dave, thanks for visiting with
Happy
us.
to be here.
This was the fantastic. I've been looking forward to having this talk for quite some time.
You're in review.
I'm in my element talking about all this fun stuff.
To.
We have a lot of fun things planned. And thanks for visiting with us. We look forward to seeing you again at our next roundtable. Have a great day.